I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to The Conversation with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along. Today is Wednesday, October 12th, 2022. And Wednesdays, we focus on wealth building, creating wealth in our community. We talk about intergenerational wealth, and often we focus on home ownership as the primary tool for moving ordinary people into systems, processes, practices that allow them to grow wealth, to build wealth for the family, for the individual, for the community. Well, that's what we're going to focus on today. If you have a question or a comment that you want to make to join this conversation, we'd love to hear your stories, anecdotes, or questions you may have for us or our guests today. And we're going to post the way to reach us on the screen and jump in. We want to hear from you about home ownership and wealth creation in our community. Let me first begin by welcoming my writing partner, Brenda Lyle-Gray. Brenda, how you doing? Good to see you again, as always.
How are you?
I am well. How are you?
Good. Good sign here with the early voting. People are flocking to the voting polls, so that's a good thing.
In your state or around the country?
Around the country.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
It's a good
That's
sign.
a good thing. Let's remind people that most everywhere they can vote today. They don't have to wait till November to do the midterm election. And actually, we want to encourage people to vote early.
Yep.
Yeah.
We'd like to know where we are.
That's right. That's right. There's a lot at stake. Let me introduce another friend, Brenda, Linda White. I have always viewed her as a banker and civic leader, but she's done much more than that. But she was a leader in the U.S. Bank Organization, among other places, and I think presently is doing work in the field we're talking about, home ownership and wealth creation, through Model Cities in St. Paul. Model Cities is a hugely impactful and wonderful organization that has is a legacy leader in wealth creation, stabilization, community development in St. Paul and really in the region as well. Linda White, good afternoon. Welcome to the conversation. How you doing?
I'm doing well, and I'm so honored to be on your show. Thank you both so much for having us and giving us an opportunity to talk about our work.
Well, it's so good to see you again. I was saying before we went on that you and I go back, I would say almost a generation, but that's a simple way to say it. Linda, this program is intended to be both informative and fun. Brenda and I, just so you know, are kindergarten classmates. We were in kindergarten together.
Everyone has that expression.
That's good.
And we're both 75 now.
Wow.
And so how much more fun can you have than that, to be talking with the person that you started off with? And I tell people too that Brenda's best friend is a person who's also named Brenda, who was born minutes after me at the University of Kansas Medical Center. I tell the story that my mom and Brenda Isom's mom were both in labor at the same time at the hospital, and they had to wheel Brenda Isom's mom out, wheel my mom in. I was born, and then minutes later, Brenda came back in. She was born. Well, so that Brenda is Brenda's best friend. It's a circle that's wonderful, and we're all in touch, and it's a wonderful thing.
Yes, it is. My goodness, those friendships that last forever are so priceless.
A lot of memories. A lot of good memories.
Yeah. Brenda is an educator, a retired educator in New Mexico, and is also an author. And she continues to be a prodigious writer, writing stories every day for Insight News, being the reporting half of this operation. So I'm grateful to her and appreciative of her skill, talent, vision, and her capacity to put in context all that we discuss and to present that in ways that are I say, compelling and clarifying for the benefit of our readers and listeners. So we have fun. We have fun. So
That's
this is
great.
and
I'm
we just
so
want to flow.
honored.
So let me start with this, Linda White. Let's talk about model cities, first of all, just as a base. Model Cities 101, Model Cities Housing in particular 101. Give the story. What's the
But that
background?
goes back, Al, when we were growing up. Wasn't there a Model Cities program?
That's when it
Yes,
started, back in
That's what
the,
I thought.
not when we were growing
that
up, I
is,
think in 1965 or so, 64, as
Yeah.
part of Lyndon Johnson's Great Society.
Okay.
And
Okay.
that's kind of
That's
where
where it came from.
Model Cities actually was a major part of movement of our people from being locked out of professional development and limited only to teaching and law, those kinds of professions and the ministry, but moved us into both the nonprofit, public sector management, and also was the first stage of moving our people into corporate America. And a lot of the people that became corporate, managers, vice presidents, movers and shakers started in places like model cities.
I
And they
thought
got a
I
year
had,
or two or
I
three or
thought that.
four of organizational experience, management experience, reporting experience, and they came to the corporate world prepared and capable, and they've changed the way the world operates. So Linda, talk about your organization.
great. Thank you. Model Cities has actively been working in the Rondo and Frogtown community and our neighborhoods for 55 years. We celebrate our 55th anniversary this year, 2022. You could say that we evolved from a small health neighborhood initiative to what we are today, a comprehensive human services provider and community-based developer. Now, the developer part of it. I am sitting in our new facility called the Brownstone Building. And I am specifically sitting in what we lovingly call the reading room, that is focusing on the history of the Pullman Porters, who were part of the middle class of St. Paul in our history. And it is a beautiful place here. We have books, we have pictures, and so on. A very nice place to be able to visit. Now, today, we offer home ownership services. That includes the homestretch class, financial education classes, and pre-purchase counseling. And we take a person from where they are and where they are financially. We work with them on their credit, on budgeting, on building savings so that they meet the requirements of mortgage lenders to be approved for a mortgage. Our other services we work with in housing, you mentioned housing, Al. We have other buildings where we house single parents, mostly women, and their children. And we provide these wraparound services for them so that they become independent and are able to support themselves and their families. They are participants in our financial education classes. Now, the financial education classes, you were speaking of friendships and so on, and the history of those friendships. That financial education class was born out of Camphor United Methodist Church. Some 12 years ago, the Reverend Gloria Roach Thomas saw a need in her congregation for financial education. She tapped the resources of one of my childhood friends. We both went to St. Peter Claver Elementary School. That is another pillar of this community. And we formed a bond to put together the topics in our course, Fiscally Fit, that we felt would help people stabilize their financial lives And we did that and also offered free one-on-one classes. It's one thing to learn the topic, but then putting it into practice. Let's look at your credit report. Let's look at the budget. Do you have a budget? To begin to show them by putting those two things together that they can create a roadmap for themselves to move forward and achieve their financial success and goals. So that is what we do. We don't do it alone, though. We have collaborative partners. You mentioned 9,000 Equities. We've been working with Build Wealth, Aurora St. Anthony Development Center, and of course, Model Cities and Camphor. When the home capacity funds under Minnesota Housing first came into fruition. We are funded by those and we have goals. We achieve those goals. As a matter of fact, it enables us to reach out. At least 75% of our clients at Model Cities are African American. Okay. And so that is so important. Not that we don't serve BIPOC and we don't serve Caucasians, we do. But that high percentage enables us to make sure that programs like 9,000 Equities could achieve those long-term goals. And that is addressing the disparities that we have for African Americans in home ownership itself.
So let's talk about the notion that we should be, all of us, thinking about whether home ownership is right for us. Everybody doesn't have to or doesn't need to own a home. For some people, renting is really a better choice, a good option. And even in doing that, you need to have a certain knowledge, a certain wisdom to make sure that what you do, the decisions you make, are effective and supportive of your ongoing long-term goals. But I think that our focus has been on home ownership and wealth creation because we know that the value of an investment in a home, a house, property, means an appreciation of an asset, and that appreciation is a gift that keeps on giving. I say that because, where I'm sitting now, Linda, here on Thomas Avenue, North Minneapolis, is a house that I bought in 1973. And I can tell you that when I moved in here, I moved in on a contract for deed.
Wow.
Actually, I moved in paying rent to the people that own this house who were moving because of their job to Atlanta, right? And so their monthly payment for rent was like $117 a month, right? And so I simply had to pay them the $117 a month, which I was able to do. But as it turned out, they were moving, had a family, had challenges, and were not paying the mortgage. So at a certain time, there was a demand from their mortgage company, and they put the house on the market kind of from under me and my new family, right? And so luckily, a neighborhood realtor guy, black guy, saw it, bought the property, and though the mortgage due at that time was $11,000, which I could not get or afford or get financed for at that time, he was able to acquire the property and sell it to me on the contract for deed for $18,000.
Wow.
A gift, a thing of beauty, right? And I can tell you that the property that I'm in probably has a market value of around $400,000 right now.
That is a great story.
That's
I didn't know your own story.
That's a gift that keeps on giving. So that's how
that unique?
I got my business going.
Yes.
Got my kids through private schools, kids through college, and hopefully I'm looking at a future that is going to be fun and exciting.
Exactly.
So talk about that. Talk about how people should look at this question of the value and the power of investing and owning and what it can do for you, the individual or family, but what it means for the community.
Absolutely. I think in terms of making that decision, rent or buy, That is exactly why we have the course called Home Stretch, because it covers everything it takes to become a homeowner, all the processes, all the requirements that you have to meet. With that information, I think a person can make an informed decision. But just like you mentioned, there are people who choose to rent. But now lately, let's look at those rents. The rents are astronomical. And so where people may have decided renting is fine, even 2 years ago, even post-pandemic. And I think post-pandemic has caused us all to start reflecting and thinking about more about the future. In addition to that, they are now thinking, well, if I'm going to pay that $1,500 a month, $1,800, $2,000 a month, why not invest that in myself and my family? So this rethinking process, I think, is going on. And at the same time, they who come to us saying, I can do this, I need some help, but point me in the direction. Give me some assistance, help me get there. It is so gratifying after working with clients who are so determined for 6 months, a year and a half, and they finally have the keys to their property. It is such a gratifying feeling to know that Model Cities had something to do with them getting that home, and we are doing what we need to do in the community, in our neighborhoods. The neighborhoods stabilize when there are more homeowners in that neighborhood.
I've heard my friends over at Bill Wealth say that you're going to be paying for somebody's mortgage. It may as well be yours. If you're renting,
Absolutely.
you're still making a mortgage payment. You just don't get the equity, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Because what you talked about, Al, you talked about something very important that you build over time, and that is the equity and how you may need to use that down the road. I have done the same thing, use the equity to help raise my daughter, get her in a private school at the time, and then see her be successful. And without that equity in the home, and by the way, when you use the equity in your home to borrow money, that interest rate is much lower than you see with anything else today, because you have that solid piece of collateral in which to support that loan that you might be asking for. So the building the wealth starts at a time that you purchase that home, you look to the future, and you're maintaining it, and you know how to maintain it so that it becomes that wonderful asset, and that you retire in it, or you make it available to somebody else in the community at a fair price, and the community continues to build in that manner.
I often think, Brenda, when we were growing up, I remember seeing a diagram that showed how money moves in the community. And if memory serves me properly, the diagram had a person or a family working and getting a paycheck, and then that person taking the proceeds of that check to neighborhood businesses, the baker, the candlestick maker, and the banker, right? And doing the things that she or he does to maintain their life. And then the banker takes that deposit and turns around and lends it out to neighbors, businesses in that community, who turn around and provide the goods and services and the job that I got that pays me. So there's a circular growth that happens. And that's what happens when the money that we make stays in the community, and circulates several times. But the sad part about our community is that they say a dollar barely circulates once or fewer times in our community, whereas in some communities that dollar spends around and touches hands in the community 8 or 9 or 10 times, always appreciating and delivering opportunity and solutions for people. That sound right, Linda? That's a story I remember from a kid. Is that a proper look?
Sure. And as an individual who grew up in the Summit University area, and as a child, I was witness to the many Black-owned businesses in this community. There was a dairy home store, there were tailors, there were shoe shine shops that were the hangouts of the community. There were grocery stores, there were drug stores, and so on Rondo and on Dale and Lexington and so on. So it was easier then to turn that dollar around because that's what we saw growing up in this community. So depending on the community and the availability of Black-owned businesses, which we continue to support and foster, that dollar going around in the community, I feel, can happen and can happen again. Absolutely.
That triggers a wonderful memory, Linda. I remember in Kansas City, my dad used to go to a shop. I think, Brenda, you helped me out. I think it was on, I can't remember if it was on Prospect or if it was on Indiana. There was someplace we went to, and it was a Black-owned shoe shine business. And I just remember my dad going there probably every Saturday afternoon, else he might have worked 6 days a week for sure, but maybe half days on Saturdays, right? And then part of his routine was the barber shop and the shoe shine. And the guy would, there'd be a line. And to me, not only was it a question of the service of getting your shoes shined, but it was a place where our people were together. And I remember being a kid watching the elders, the grown people, talk about the affairs of state. Some stuff I understood, some things I didn't. I'm sure they were talking over my head, as grown people do when kids are around.
Right.
But the experience of seeing what and how community is and how it works and how we can be and how we were doing transactions, business with each other, and basically, serving each other in the process.
And cool. We had a Black-owned bank.
Absolutely.
I was 5 years old taking my little savings book to Douglas State Bank.
Oh, that's so fantastic.
Yep. And remember it. And I was just proud to be at the teller's line and counting out my change. And my father was like impatient, but that was okay because he was teaching me about money. I didn't listen too closely, but he was trying to teach me. And then it was on Indiana.
Indiana, right. Okay.
Indiana. Yeah. I remember it because we used to be outside the door because we couldn't come in, but we were listening. We wanted to hear the grown people's talk.
Yes.
And then I'd go back home, Linda, and tell my mom, do you know what they said? So it transferred. And then my mother would call her sister and she'd say, well, do you know? But they don't have that type of communication anymore. They don't know who's living on their blocks.
That's your.
Al and I just talk about Tyrone Terrell all the time. He's a Kansas City person.
Oh,
and he grew up around the area in which we did. And he just always says, knock on the door, see if they're okay, see what they need, especially during COVID. But people just wouldn't. I mean, even here, I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, but I wouldn't know who was around me. I mean, people don't even speak, which I think that's really unfortunate for seniors because they're so alone.
Yes.
And I've experienced that. I'm an only child. My children are in LA. And if I didn't have my writing, I think at times I'd be lost. But then my boss can get really tough, Linda.
She says that all the time, Linda.
I
So
know, and
I just take it with
I've
a grain
seen
of
your
salt, right?
articles, Brenda. It's just such a pleasure to see the person behind the columns that you do. It's so fantastic. And
Thank you.
as we sit in this space and the businesses we have here, West Indies Soul is going to be right on the corner of this building at University in Victoria. She doesn't even know that I'm doing this commercial for her. But my goodness gracious. And then we do have a barber on the other side. And to see people coming and going in those businesses in this community is just fantastic.
It's empowering to watch.
West Indies Soul, Brenda, by the way, is the absolute best Caribbean food in Minnesota. Absolute best. So let her know I'm talking about her. She's my friend from way back when, but we miss her. She's got a catering business and she's had different locations. I'm so glad to hear she's coming back with
wow.
She is, and she's just about ready. She's doing some catering now.
Yeah.
She did the catering for an event, a luncheon we had at the NDC, Neighborhood Development Corporation.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so great to see her there and say, welcome, and please hurry up and open because we're hungry. You know, her food is great.
There's no comparison. Great. She's the absolute very best. She's setting the standard, raising the bar, and has it very, very high. So I'm so pleased that she's going to be housed where you are there in the brownstone. It's wonderful.
I know. It's going to be so great. And when you see those businesses thrive, it's just fantastic. And I know she's going to thrive here.
Yeah.
I really do.
Let's come look around. You know, Linda, I'm so fascinated that are you a native of St. Paul? You born there?
I am a native of St. Paul, and so are my 6 siblings. And matter of fact, Al, my brother, Frank White, told me something I did not know about you, and that you speak fluent Spanish.
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
All these days that I have known you, going back to the north side, I had no idea. Is it something you're modest about, or my goodness?
No, not at all, Linda. He loves it. When he broke that out on me, when I've been writing for him for 2 years now. And he broke out one time, and I said, "Oh no, you didn't."
Wow.
And just rolled it out. And I said, "Oh my goodness."
I know. Oh my goodness. Kudos.
It was wonderful to hear, though. He's given so many people opportunities, and then just to hear him, just elevate himself to another level of being bilingual, and like, how much higher can he go? Doggone it!
I know, I'm jealous, because
I know
my father is African American, but my mother is Mexican, and we didn't speak Spanish at the time growing up. Matter of fact, instead of celebrating that gift of Spanish, people looked down on it because my mother and others didn't speak English. That was so arrogant now that I think of it. But we didn't learn it. But I made sure I didn't learn it, but I made sure my daughter and my granddaughters can speak fluently. Thank goodness when we speak to the relatives who speak fluent Spanish.
And it should be encouraged.
That's so important.
It is.
Yeah.
And the schools,
really should be.
Yes.
I'm going to show this. Maybe Vosh, if you, Vosh is reading my mind. Let me bring this up. Tell me if you can see this.
Can see it.
So we've got a section in the paper called Afrodescendientes. And I started Afrodescendientes a couple of years ago, working with a friend of your brother's. You might know her as well, Carmen
Carmen
Robles.
Robles.
You know Carmen, right? And
Yes.
so she's been one of your brother's fans forever and has always brought him to be on the show. We do a version of this show that we call Conversaciones con Al McFarlane y Carmen Robles. She always trills the R, so I enjoy saying her name.
Oh, yes.
But we early on started doing stories that were in English and in Spanish. And the idea was that it allowed me to celebrate my Cuban heritage. My father was born in Cuba. His parents, Jamaicans, they moved from Jamaica to Cuba.
Oh,
Uh,
how interesting.
some of them moved to Panama. I've got Panamanian relatives as well. Some of them, after that generation, moved to London. I've got a lot of family in London. So, but the Spanish part was that when my dad was born in Cuba, his first language was Spanish for his formative years, and then he got into English both from at home, but in school when they returned to Jamaica, and then he came from Jamaica to here at the in the middle of World War II. When growing up, when my father got mad, he'd go to Spanish. Probably curse words, I don't know, but the feeling of the language is something that I absorbed. And then when I got into seventh grade, they were offering Spanish. I took Spanish and I excelled. And from seventh grade on through university, I was always in advanced Spanish. I also took French, also took Chinese. I discovered an ability, a facility with language, and that also strengthened my capacity in English. That's why I'm a writer and why I have this relationship with language, with the word. Well, so we started off relaunching Afrodescendientes, and I have a writer in Venezuela, a writer in Bahia, in Brazil, and I've developed writers in other places around the country. And
Wow.
right now we're presenting these essays not only in English, but they originate in Spanish, translated into Portuguese. Then we decided to add Somali, since our community here is so Somali intensive, right?
For
And
that,
then we
yes.
decided to add, the Yoruba, and we also decided to add French and Swahili. So there you have it. And what's the idea? So
Wow.
you get the paper, you see all these languages, one story. You might not be able to read any of them except for the English one, but you become familiar. At some point in time, we want all of us and our children to believe that we are natural owners.
Yes.
We have a natural capacity to master these languages, and it's not an exception to the rule. It's who we are. So that's the idea.
Absolutely.
That's the idea.
That is so fantastic.
So let me
My
talk to you
goodness.
more about being, how many generations in St. Paul then are you? And talk about your mom and your dad and how your family, emerged in the Rondo and St. Paul community.
My mother and father met at Mechanic Arts High School.
Uh-huh.
My father, Louis White, was well into sports. As a matter of fact, he's in the Minnesota Baseball Hall of Fame. I am told he was quite the baseball player. So they decided to marry, and of course, that was considered a mixed marriage at the time. And we grew up in St. Paul, but certainly we spent enough of our time at my grandmother's on the Old West Side. Things change, right? Over time, it's the Old West Side and the Rondo community, Mechanic Arts High School, and so on. My grandfather, Louis White Sr., also was here. He grew up from another city and came here and married my grandmother, Louise Young. So we can kind of trace, Frank has done this work. Firston would be my great-grandfather who purchased a house on Thomas in the Frogtown neighborhood.
Mm-hmm.
It was fascinating to me because it was a German neighborhood. I said, oh, wow, how in the world did he pull that off? So, but we grew up on Eichelhart in St. Paul part of the time when we were teenagers, at a time that everybody knew the neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody knew our dog and feared our dog, Penny, just a regular old dog, and they feared him. But we knew our neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
And when they changed and the freeway came in, 94 came in, they ended up flattening all the houses on Eichelhart, took them out, and it was just land. And I ended up purchasing the lot where I grew up as a teenager on Eichelhart, and that's where I built my house. And that's where I live today.
Wow.
And so we know our neighbors on that street.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of them built houses when I did. So it's fantastic. And
So was Eichelhart torn down at first, the original, or how did?
the houses, yes. And they moved some of the houses to other places, more on the
They
south
tore
side.
those houses down in order to build the freeway on 94, but there was land still available.
Land
after they
still,
put in the installation.
correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Correct. And the old control data plant was one of the anchors there on Concordia,
Mm-hmm.
the old Rondo.
Mm-hmm.
And in the back of that, on the north side of Eichelhart, that is where the land was to build, sell those lots to people like myself.
Mm-hmm.
And I still enjoy a culturally diverse neighborhood today and know my neighbors. So it's fantastic. All of my siblings are still here. We lost my mother and father, but my siblings are here, and we get together. We cherish getting together as family, and that's a tradition that my parents always saw to. And I asked my dad one time, Dad, why don't you come to Florida with us on vacation? You and Mom have never really taken a trip.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, that's not important to me. What is important to me and your mother is that all of you are well and all of you succeed in what you want to do in life.
Wow.
I was humbled by that.
Mm-hmm.
And as you know, I think it made me more determined, Al,
Mm-hmm.
to get ahead in my own career and to always give back. They were the epitome of giving back to the community, my mother and father, and grandparents, as a matter of fact. Yeah.
That's a wonderful story. So talk about your career, where you went to school. You mentioned you were at St. Peter Claver. That is an institution. I mean, talk about that, first of all. We don't
Sure.
talk about it enough. It's our
I
father,
smile.
Denzel Carty. Was he there when you were there?
I'm
Or before you were there
not,
before him?
I don't think so, but what was there, Al, is a ferocious order of Black nuns, the Oblate Sisters of
Yeah.
Providence, who were our teachers. And I'm telling you, that is where I believe and attribute my own foundation to. And
Yusef
others
says the
who went
same
to
thing
school
now.
there. Yes. Oh my goodness. the
Yusef
foundation.
and Jeannie talks about those Black nuns all the time.
I
And
know.
he says exactly what you said. That was his foundation.
Oh, absolutely. And he's one of my classmates. So we, from there, then there were the schools where Central and Mechanics kind of came together. I got in my career right out of high school, Al. So the preparation and classes I took were offered by banking themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I started at First National Bank of St. Paul,
Mm-hmm.
downtown St. Paul, the building with the big one on it.
Yep.
Before they merged, before deregulation happened and banks could be operating other places and so on. And that's when it became U.S. Bank, and I hit a ceiling in St. Paul, And my boss at the time encouraged me to go after a position that was opening in Minneapolis. I did, and I assisted there, and it was recognized. And so when they started to appoint presidents in some of the banks, it's about 19, 4 of those were women, and 1 was a Black female, and that was myself. I just enjoyed working in the north side of Minneapolis with the Minnesota African American Chamber, the West Broadway Business Association, Minnesota Working Capital, and oh my goodness, it was just a tremendous experience. And working with the churches there. Reverend McAfee at the time, I taught some credit classes early in his, at that time in his church and others. So it was a great experience to have worked there. And then, when I left, an opportunity came available at the Department of Civil Rights in Minneapolis. Now, think of the St. Paul native and my family seeing all this activity across the river. They didn't appreciate it at the time, but, I think the 2 cities have become closer and we're not as competitive as we used to be. But I've had a wonderful career, and I've been involved in a lot of community boards and so on. So that is what feeds my passion, my determination, taking a skill set that I had there and moving it over and working one-on-one with families. It is the most gratifying job that I have had in my career, what I am doing today.
I'm so glad to have this conversation with you, Linda White. And what comes through to me is the sense of progress. I know we are beset by images in media and things that make us fearful and make us feel like, the sky is falling, right? And that everything's about to go to hell. But somewhere, despite all of that, there is something foundational and something that is reflection of a resilience that is an inheritance, right? That is a guiding factor in all of our lives and in and through our culture. And it's a reflection of this indomitable spirit to not only survive, but to continue moving towards thriving, development, advancement. And in a sense, no matter what they say, as the poet said, we still rise. We rise.
That's right.
I hear that, and I see that in you and in the story that you're telling.
Oh, well, thank you. And I have the spiritual base there too. Oh my goodness, it hasn't all been easy. One who goes through the career that I've had of 30 years, and it hasn't always been easy. But my spiritual base has helped me in those times. Community leaders and mentors have helped me during those times overcome and keep me down that path so that I could succeed in what I wanted to do and achieve in life and help others along the way. So, and I'm still doing that. As long as I'm healthy, I'm going to continue to move clients into home ownership with 700 and above credit scores.
Wasn't it Camphor that tried to do a campaign that said all of our members should have a score of 700? Was that Camphor that did that?
Well, that wouldn't surprise me if in fact they did do that for sure. Because you really need 660 used to be a very good credit score. Really today though, to get a low interest rate, you need some over 700. So that is what we shoot for with our clients.
I'm points shy of 800 right now.
Wow.
Personally, with the goal of within, hopefully before this year's over, certainly by 6 months from now, I've set a goal of 840, 820, 840. That's where I want to be.
That's the top.
Hmm.
You can't get much higher than that, Al.
Hmm.
So go for it.
Yeah.
You would be a model, and someone you should have your own show saying how you got to that, because life happens
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
And I
people
remember
go have,
being at 400 and 300,
I do too.
listen,
so I've been there,
absolutely.
Yeah.
And you persevere.
Yeah.
Speaking of
I'm at
perseverance,
755 right now,
There you
but
go.
I tell you
See?
what, I still can't get a house. Yeah, the ceiling where I am is so high. I had pre-qualified at my bank that I had been at for 17 years. I had pre-qualified for home wise and going through the classes, but I couldn't get a place.
wow.
So
Is that inventory that wasn't available, Brenda?
no, it's available. It was so interesting. Bank of America is now helping Black females to, get, I think, the mortgage, maybe a couple months, and also the down payment.
Oh,
So
good.
I called Bank of America here and I said, just because this is Minneapolis, does that mean that Bank of America would not acknowledge someone in New Mexico? And they said, no, there's certain states that have those programs.
Yeah.
But I'm not giving up. I would like to leave something for my children.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Never
And
give up.
thanks to being able to work for McFarlane Media, that helped.
Oh, for sure.
So I'm not giving up.
No, don't give up, my
And I
goodness.
just grab more information, the more powerful people that we interview, and wonderful people in your cities. I love them.
That
So
is
What's cool,
anyway,
yeah.
it's really
what,
good to hear.
what's
Yeah,
cool, Brenda, is your willingness to share that, because somebody
that's
listening
right.
somewhere is going to say, "Oh yeah, I know that. I've been there. I
Right.
know how to do this." Right. So
Exactly.
that's why Linda. I always on Fridays we do what we call the healing circle with Dr. B. You might know Dr. Bravada Akinsanya. You might not know her, but she's runs the African American Child Wellness Institute,
Oh, yeah.
and she's a certified, I guess, a psychologist, and has a
Yes.
practice with counselors and stuff. So uh, at 75, it's been maybe a year now, 2 years now, I've been a client, a patient of theirs, going to a regular visit with the therapist. And what I told myself is that, number one, I deserve to be healthy. I deserve healing, and I deserve to be a healer, right? And
Yes.
you have to be healed to do that. The healing
Right.
has to be going on in your life. And so I say it all the time and publicly with the intent of some other brother, some other Black person, but
Right.
particularly a Black man. All of us have these stigma, issues and masculinity issues where I got to be tough, I got to have a thick skin, and I can't admit that, I have doubts, fears, questions, and that I need help.
Right.
And so I am glad for this program that allows me, just as Brenda just talked about that, to share what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And my intent is that somebody else listening is
For
having the
sure.
same experience I'm having, or has had a solution that I'm looking for,
Absolutely.
or that my story is a solution for somebody else and
Absolutely.
paying it forward. So I love
And the
that
fact
part of
you
the show.
don't give up.
And there you
Yes.
go. You don't
Health
quit.
is health is everything. I think my director, Makisha Hall, and our CEO, Kizzy Downey, they always say, "Oh, Miss White, are you going to really retire?" I said, as long as I am healthy, I am going to do what I enjoy doing.
Hmm.
So I have to also keep myself healthy. But for you to talk about, Al, what so many, especially younger Black men, are perhaps fearful of doing,
Hmm.
and that is engaging in counseling that would be very helpful to our overall wellness
There you go.
because of those stigmas.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for sharing that and expanding on that in your show on Friday as well. That is so fantastic.
And I think George Floyd opened that door.
Oh,
I mean, Al and I always talk about, Till, and I'm debating whether I want to see the movie or not. There's certain movies, but they said it's so well done. But George Floyd's execution televised and everything that happened, every time you just kind of feel his spirit.
correct.
It's just something about it. And when President Biden, pardoned marijuana, inmates or whatever, and
Offenses.
you just think that big things like that are happening because people saw what we knew all along.
Correct.
And it's just opening up so many doors.
I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. It's just amazing the things that are beginning to happen
Yeah.
because of the heightened awareness of actually seeing something. There it
Seeing
was.
the truth, Linda.
There it was.
Yep.
For everybody to see.
Yep.
Did you know Deborah Watt? Linda, do you know her?
I don't know that I do.
She's from here, but she's Emmett Till's cousin.
Wow.
And she's been like one of the advocates and champions of keeping Mamie Till's history and story, her power, alive.
Phenomenal.
And she had one of the several Emmett Till legacy initiatives in the country that different members of the family have done. But she has been here on a regular basis. I've known her for years and years and years. And she always has stayed focused, and I have to tell her, I told her this, she was so focused on the Emmett Till story for years and years that I think that, and I apologize for this, like a lot of people, you get tired, not tired, but you hear something so much, you become, I'm not sure the right words for it, but you end up putting it somewhere in your mind and spirit that really doesn't give it the proper, space in terms of your own life and history of our country. But I'm sure that I wasn't the only one. And I'm sure that, when she'd walk into a room, people say, oh, here comes Deborah, she's talking about Emmett, right? That probably is what she experienced, right? And her perseverance, her persistence now has resulted in legislation at the federal level about Emmett Till and resulted in a new awareness and knowledge and the re-examination of forensic evidence around the murder and even the potential for charges of the woman who said that she was whistled at because there were some legal documents that were prepared but never served that had been somewhere in a box in a courthouse in Mississippi that she and colleagues were actually able to go through and find and discover. So persistence pays.
It does pay for sure.
And Linda, the way these documents came up in all of these boxes was like, wow.
It's the work of the ancestors.
Yeah,
and the work
for
of the
sure.
Ancestors were saying, look in this box.
In this spot, in
That's
this
right.
box.
And I went, wow.
For sure. Oh my goodness. That gives you chills, doesn't it?
It does. It does.
And so back to this conversation and this, I love that we're able to be together and have these conversations. And I value this so much. And I thank you, Linda, for all that you have done. When I met you, you were a banker, and I've known you as a banker all of my professional life, but I know you've gone on to do other things. But I always saw you first as a executive
Yeah,
and
I understand.
a person doing work in the banking arena, and one of few. You were
One of the
way
few.
out, way
Oh
out in
my.
front early on.
And
You
they
know,
might
so
not have known what you were, Linda.
Well,
My mother's
okay.
side of the family passed, and my
You're,
uncle my
you're
uncle
so
got a
right.
job as putting in air conditions in the Pickwick hotels all around the world. He was the only one with an education. And I tell you, I said, Uncle Shep, they didn't even know you were black. That's the reason you got that job. But Linda, it's so good to hear model cities after
Oh,
all this many
I
years. It
know.
just popped up, and I'm saying,
I
and
know.
where I associated it, Al, was Parade Parks.
mhm.
That was one of the first
Model Cities
areas that
Project.
model cities worked with,
Wow.
and the whites finally got that property. They had
Uh,
been working for 40 years to get
mhm.
parade parks, and so they were finally able, because it's gentrification
It's
so
gone
bad
now.
in Kansas City, it's
Absolutely.
Yeah,
unreal.
yeah,
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
And
yeah.
to know that there are Black female-led organizations who've done some significant things, like Dr. Beverly Hawkins here,
Hmm.
and then she was instrumental in promoting one of her directors, Kizzy Downey, when she retired. She was instrumental in getting this brownstone building done.
Hmm.
Naida Presley of Aurora St. Anthony Development Center is instrumental and led the effort to get Western Flats up and running on Western and University. Those are two Black females that I admire and respect for what they did and for the community. And as I'm sitting here, I'm still in awe of what they've been able to accomplish.
So many great women now. I think about Gordon Parks's sister, Lillian. Is it Lillian
Yes, Lillian
uh,
Parks Thomas, you
Thomas? I think
bet.
about her. I think about Katie McWatt.
Katie McWatt is
Yeah.
another,
I
for
think about
sure.
Keisha,
Willie Mae Wilson, ran
Urban
the
League,
Urban League for a
you
long
bet,
time. And I
you
think
bet.
about Beverly Hawkins and I traveled to Uganda together.
Really?
Ask her
wow.
about that. We were on a project with health partners in particular, and also that was supported by Land O'Lakes.
My,
And it was a project to talk about health initiatives in Uganda, where uh, this farming collaborative had figured out how to save and keep animals healthy, but didn't have the cooperative mechanism to keep the human beings healthy.
oh,
And so health partners stepped in at the invitation of um, Land O'Lakes, who was
mm-hmm,
the USDA or the contractor to do the animal development thing in Uganda, and they brought in how do we replicate this, but in and for human beings. And Beverly, as Model Cities, as a health organization at the time, was one of the ones there to both listen, learn, and share
Wow.
successes. So it was wonderful. But we had a
wow,
great time, and I just have the massive respect. But so many powerful, and Debbie Montgomery, uh,
yeah,
former, yeah, was a
yes,
deputy police chief in St. Paul, I think.
mm-hmm,
Oh,
you bet,
man, a lot of great people. Well,
right,
listen, this has been a
thank
great
you.
conversation.
It's
And
been fun.
yeah, yeah, I
You know,
thank
I
you
was
so
kind of
much.
nervous coming on here, and I said, "Oh my goodness." But this is just a conversation. And Brenda, I am so honored to have met you and know
Aren't
who's
you
writing these
kind? You
wonderful
made my
columns.
day.
My
I got to
goodness.
ask my boss for a raise on that one, Linda.
Oh, see, you-
I enjoy it. I love what I do. He can get tough, but I love him and I'm grateful to him because he literally saved me. I lost my job with the governor down here when the GOP came in and took
Oh.
out all of my work on the Pueblos.
Oh, wow.
But yeah, I was doing, one of them was getting ready to go national.
Oh,
But,
wow.
the GOP came in and
Mhm.
boom. But I've been given an opportunity to write and I'm having a ball. A lot of midnight hours, 2 and 3 in the morning. He will have the nerve to say, well, I got an article around 3 or 4. I said, don't you dare. So good meeting you, Linda. I just
Oh,
love
so
your
nice meeting you.
spirit.
And thank
Just
you.
beautiful.
Thank you, Al. Thank you so much. It's great to reconnect. I've seen you in different housing fairs and so on that you've helped us facilitate and so on. And I enjoy those times. And for all that you do with Insight News and these conversations, thank you so much on behalf of not only myself, Model Cities, but the community at large. You're one of those fantastic men that I admire.
And now he's grooming his daughter. So that's a good thing.
It is a very good
He's
thing.
now the publisher now. So
Oh,
that's
that is so
really,
great.
really neat.
That's great.
That Black families are able to turn over businesses to the next generation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's what we should be
Wonderful
about.
thing.
That's part of legacy too, right?
Yep.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to give him too many more kudos.
There you go.
The Spanish and the family legacy is enough. But when I get off there, Linda, I might give him a. But thank you. I enjoy writing those articles.
Yeah. All right.
Linda, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you both.
Take
Have a good day.
care.
We'll
Have
talk
a
to you
good
later.
one.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is The Conversation. We'll see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.